I paid $180,000 for their comfort. They paid me with silence. That's not a metaphor. I kept the receipts. Every transfer. Every check. Every polite thank you. Dad, that came a few hours too late and sounded a little too rehearsed. It started, like most expensive mistakes, on a Tuesday morning. March 14th, 2022.9:17 a.m. I remember because my coffee had gone cold. I always drink it slowly, 2 sugars, a splash of milk, the way Margaret used to make it before. Well, before the house got quiet, the phone rang just as I was rinsing my cup. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. My son didn't call in the mornings unless he needed something. Dad, he said, skipping the greeting. Are you busy? I looked around my kitchen. The old oak table. The chipped ceramic bowl with 3 apples. The radio humming low in the corner, tuned to a station that played songs from 30 years ago. I was planning to reorganize my sock drawer, I said, but I suppose that can wait. He didn't laugh. That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be. A pause, then a sigh. The kind people use when they're about to present you with a problem disguised as an opportunity. We found a house. Of course they did. Daniel and his wife, Claire, had been looking for 2 years. Looking, in their case, meant touring properties far outside their budget and sending me photos with captions like, "Isn't this perfect?" "Congratulations," I said, dry my hands with a towel that had seen better decades. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with it," he snapped. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, new kitchen, good school district." "And the part where you tell me the number?" Another pause. Longer this time. $640,000. I let that sit between us. Numbers like that need space. "And how much do you have?" I asked. "Well," Claire's voice appeared in the background, whispering something. "We have about $60,000 saved, but the down payment needs to be at least 20%. I did the math automatically. Old habits. 45 years as an electrical engineer teaches you to trust numbers more than people. "You're short about $68,000, I said. 72 with closing costs, Daniel corrected quickly. 2, quickly. There it was, the real number, already polished, already prepared. "And the bank?" I asked. "They'll approve us if we can show the down payment," he said. "Everything else is solid." Of course it was. It's always solid when someone else is expected to carry the unstable parts. I walked over to the window. The backyard was still the same patchy grass, a crooked fence I kept meaning to fix. The old bird feeder Margaret had insisted on installing. "You know," I said slowly, "when your mother and I bought this house in 1987, we had $12,000 saved, and we thought we were being reckless." "Dad, it's not 1987 anymore." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Another silence. This one heavier. Expectant. "Look," he said finally, his tone softening into something almost persuasive. "We're not asking for a gift. It's an investment. In family. In stability. In your grandson's future." He always brought up Ethan at the right moment. Like a card he kept hidden up his sleeve. I closed my eyes for a second. "Send me the details," I said. That was mistake number 1. By March 18th, I had wired $75,000. I remember sitting at the bank, the leather chair too soft beneath me. The young clerk explaining the transfer process like I didn't understand what money was. "Are you sure you want to proceed with this amount, Mr. Caldwell?" "I've been sure about worse decisions," I said. She didn't smile. The confirmation receipt came out warm from the printer. I folded it carefully and placed it in my jacket pocket. Even then, something in me wanted proof. A record. Evidence that I had willingly stepped onto this particular road. That evening, Daniel called again. "You saved us, Dad. Seriously." Claire got on the line, too. Her voice was bright, almost musical. "We couldn't have done this without you. We're so grateful." Grateful. It's a flexible word. It stretches. It shrinks. Sometimes it disappears entirely. "Just take care of the house," I said. "And each other." "Of course," she replied. "Of course." The housewarming was on April 9th. They had fairy lights in the backyard. A grill going. Music playing just a little too loud. Everything smelled like new paint and expensive candles. I brought a bottle of wine. Not too expensive, not too cheap. The kind Margaret used to call safe. Claire hugged me at the door. "Welcome, Dad." Dad. She only called me that when other people were listening. "Nice place," I said, stepping inside. The floors gleamed. The kitchen counters were spotless. A $3,000 refrigerator hummed quietly in the corner. I told you it was worth it, Daniel said, clapping me on the shoulder. You can see where your investment went. Investment. There it was again. I nodded, running my hand along the edge of the countertop. Looks expensive. It is, Claire laughed. But you only live once, right? I didn't answer. Instead, I looked around at the guests, friends, colleagues, people I didn't recognize. They were drinking wine, complimenting the house, asking Daniel about mortgage rates like he had earned the right to explain them. At one point, I overheard Claire speaking to a woman near the kitchen island. My father-in-law helped a little with the down payment, she said casually, just to get us started. A little. $75,000 had become a little. I stood there for a moment, holding my glass, feeling something small and cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just awareness. Like noticing a crack in the wall that hadn't been there before. I finished my wine in 2 slow sips. Everything all right, Dad? Daniel asked. Perfect, I said. And I meant it. Because at that moment, I still believed this was the last check I would ever have to write. The second transfer didn't feel like a decision. That's the dangerous part. The first one still has weight. You sit with it. You justify it. You even rehearse how you'll explain it to yourself later. The second comes easier, like opening a door that no longer resists. May 2nd, 2022.11:43 a.m. I was in the middle of fixing my old radio, the one Margaret bought me in 1998, the one that always lost signal when the weather turned, when my phone buzzed. A message this time. Daniel. Hey, Dad, quick question. Are you home? Need to talk. Quick questions are never quick. He arrived 20 minutes later, still in his work clothes. Tie loosened just enough to suggest stress, but not enough to be real discomfort. He didn't sit down right away, walked around the living room instead, glancing at things he'd grown up with like they were part of a museum exhibit. You haven't changed anything, he said. Things worked fine the first time, I replied, tightening a screw on the radio casing. He nodded, but his attention was elsewhere. Always elsewhere. It's about the house, he said finally. Of course it was. I set the screwdriver down carefully. Small movements help delay large conversations. What now? There is an issue with the roof. I looked up at him. The inspection didn't catch it. Happens all the time. But with the spring rains, we're seeing some leakage in the attic. And the cost? I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be small. He exhaled slowly. About $18,500. Precise. Pre-packaged. Ready to present. And your emergency fund? We used most of it on closing adjustments. You know how that goes. No, I didn't know how that went. Because when Margaret and I bought a house, adjustments meant choosing cheaper curtains. And insurance? I asked. They're disputing it, claiming it's pre-existing damage. Convenient. I stood up, my knees protesting slightly. Age has a way of reminding you that everything costs something, even standing. So what you're telling me, I said, is that a house you couldn't afford now requires repairs you also can't afford. That's not fair, Dad. No, I agreed. It isn't. He softened then, changed tactics. We're just asking for a short-term loan, he said. 3 months, maybe 4. I've got a bonus coming in August. I'll pay you back. Loans between family are like promises written in pencil. I walked to the kitchen, more out of habit than necessity. Opened the fridge, closed it again. There was leftover soup in there. Lentil, Margaret's recipe. I hadn't touched it in 2 days. Behind me, Daniel continued. You always said families should help each other. I turned. I also said not to buy things you can't maintain. Silence, then quieter. So you're saying no? There it was, the pivot point, the moment where a different version of this story could have begun. I thought about the $75,000, about the housewarming, about the word little floating casually in someone else's conversation. And then I thought about Ethan, 7 years old, missing front tooth, the way he used to sit on this very couch, watching cartoons too loud. How much do you need? I asked. The transfer was $20,000. May 48.2:06 p.m. I added it to the folder where I kept the first receipt. Same careful fold. Same quiet acknowledgement that something was being built. Though I wasn't yet sure what. By June, the requests had become structured, not constant. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they arrived spaced out. Reasonable. Almost professional. June 12th, $3,450 for appliance upgrades. July 3rd, $6,200 for unexpected property taxes adjustment. July 28th, $2,800 for childcare backlog. Each one came with an explanation, a story, a tone carefully balanced between embarrassment and expectation. Claire usually handled the messaging. We hate to ask, just until things stabilize. You're such a blessing to this family. Blessings, I learned, are expensive. I started noticing changes. Small ones at first. When I visited, the refrigerator was fuller, but not with necessities. Imported cheeses, bottled juices with labels I couldn't pronounce. A coffee machine that probably cost more than my first car. Claire had new handbags. Not one, several. Daniel talked about equity growth like it was something he personally manufactured. And yet, every time I asked casually, things better now, the answer was always the same. We're just getting by. Just getting by in a $640,000 house with a wine fridge. August 15th. That's when something shifted. I was sitting at my desk reviewing my bank statement, something I've done on the 15th of every month for the past 40 years. When I noticed a transfer I didn't recognize immediately. $9,750. The description read, external transfer, authorized user. I stared at it longer than necessary. Authorized user. I only had one. Daniel. I didn't remember approving that transaction. Not directly, which meant one of two things. Either I had forgotten or I had stopped paying attention. Both possibilities bothered me. I picked up the phone, dialed his number. He answered on the third ring. Hey, Dad. His voice was relaxed. Too relaxed. Daniel, I said, keeping my tone even. What's the $9,750 transfer from August 11th? A pause. Short, but not short enough. Oh, that, he said. Yeah, I meant to tell you. Of course he did. It was for the contractor. We had to finalize some interior work. Timing was tight. And you'd said before that it was okay if. I said to ask. Another pause. Right, he said quickly. Right, of course. I just figured, given everything, it wouldn't be a problem. Wouldn't be a problem. I leaned back in my chair. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. Somewhere a dog barked once, and then stopped. Daniel, I said, how much have I given you since March? He hesitated. I don't know exactly. I do, I said, glancing at the folder on my desk. Paper doesn't forget. That's why I trust it. $117,200. Silence. Real silence this time. And in that silence, for the first time, I heard something I hadn't noticed before. Not gratitude. Not even guilt. Just calculation. Like he was already thinking about the next number. There's a particular kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels crowded, full of things that should have been said earlier. After that call on August 15th, I didn't argue. That surprised him. I could hear it in the way his voice softened, almost relieved. Dad, I'll keep you updated going forward, he said quickly. No more surprises. Of course, I replied. We both knew that wasn't true. That evening, I didn't turn on the television, didn't touch the radio either. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of me and did something I should have done months earlier. I added everything up again, slowly, carefully, line by line. March 18th, $75,000. May 4th, $20,000. June 12th, $3,450. July 3rd, $6,200. July 28th, $2,800. August 11th, $9,750. And then the smaller ones, the ones easy to forget, the rounding errors of generosity, gas money, school supplies, a temporary overdraft Claire had mentioned once with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. $117,200 had become $132,640. I wrote the final number at the bottom of the page and underlined it twice. Then I just sat there, staring at it. Numbers have a way of stripping things down. No emotion, no excuses, just fact. $132,640. Margaret and I had lived 10 years on less than that. The next morning, I made eggs. 2 of them, scrambled, burned slightly on one side because I wasn't paying attention. I ate them anyway. Waste always bothered Margaret. Food is money, she used to say, and money is time. By that logic, I'd just given Daniel over a decade of my life. I rinsed the plate slowly, watching the water spiral down the drain. That's when I remember something. A detail, small, almost irrelevant at the time. Authorized user. I dried my hands and walked to the desk in the living room. Opened the drawer where I kept old documents. Insurance papers, tax returns. Things that outlived their usefulness but felt dangerous to throw away. It took me 10 minutes to find it. A form, dated April 2nd, 2022, 2 days before the second transfer. I recognized my signature immediately. Careful, neat, the way I'd signed everything for the past 50 years. Account access authorization. Daniel Caldwell, authorized user. I sat down. I didn't remember signing it. Not clearly, but I remember the day. We had been at his house. The new one. Claire had made coffee. Too sweet, the way she always did. Papers were spread across the kitchen island. Mortgage documents. Insurance. Something about utilities. Just a formality, Daniel had said. In case of emergencies. Easier access if something happens. Something happens. At 73, something is always waiting to happen. That's the assumption people build around you. Just to your dad, Claire had added, sliding the paper closer. It's really for your convenience, too. Convenience. I signed it without reading the fine print. That was mistake number. I'd lost count. August 17th. I drove to their house unannounced. It was 6:40 p.m. dinner time. Strategic, though I wouldn't have called it that back then. Just instinct. The driveway had a new car. Black. Polished. German. I stood there for a moment, looking at it. Things are tight, I muttered to myself. I rang the doorbell. Claire opened it, smiling wide, just a fraction too wide. Oh, Dad, we weren't expecting you. I gathered that, I said, stepping inside. The smell hit me first. Steak. Garlic. Something baked. Potatoes, maybe. Rich food. Comfortable food. Daniel, she called. Your dad's here. He appeared from the kitchen, holding a glass of red wine. Hey, he said casual. Is like nothing had changed. Nice car, I said, nodding toward the driveway. He didn't miss a beat. Company lease, he replied. Temporary. Of course it was. We sat down at the table. Claire served dinner. Generous portions. She always made sure I saw abundance when I visited. Eat, Dad, she said. You look thin. I've been investing heavily, I replied. She laughed. Daniel didn't. Halfway through dinner, Ethan started talking about school. Something about a science project. Solar panels made from cardboard and aluminum foil. I listened, nodded, asked questions, because none of this was his fault. That mattered. It still does. After dessert, store-bought cheesecake, I noticed I set my fork down. Daniel, I said, I reviewed my accounts. Claire's hand froze mid-air, her fork hovering over her plate. And, he asked, and I know something interesting. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The number was written clearly at the bottom. $132,640. I slid it across the table. He looked at it, then at me, then back at the number. Claire leaned closer, reading it over his shoulder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. And in that moment, something finally became clear. Not the money, not the numbers. There was no shock on their faces, no embarrassment, no apology forming quietly behind their eyes. Just that same calculation I had heard on the phone. Quiet, efficient, like they were already deciding how to explain it. Or worse, how to justify it. Claire's the first to recover. She always was. Well, she said lightly, setting her fork down as if we were discussing the weather. When you put it all together like that, it sounds dramatic. Dramatic. $132,000 had become a matter of tone. Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, defensive posture. I'd seen it before when he was 16 and had dented the car, when he was 23 and had maxed out his first credit card. Dad, you're acting like we've been hiding something, he said. I looked at him. You took $9,750 without asking. I told you it was urgent. That's not the same thing. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. We're family. It's not like I'm some stranger stealing from you. There it was. Not denial, just redefinition. I folded my hands on the table. Steady, measured. When you stop asking, I said, you stop being family and start being something else. Claire sighed softly, the sound practiced, almost elegant. This is exactly the kind of stress we were trying to avoid, she said. Daniel, I told you we should have been more transparent. Transparent. The word hung there, polished and empty. I'm not asking for transparency, I said. I'm asking for boundaries. Daniel let out a short laugh. Boundaries? After everything you've already given? Yes, I said simply, especially after that. Silence again, but this time it wasn't crowded. It was sharp. I left 10 minutes later. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just polite goodbyes that sounded like strangers pretending to be related. Drive safe, Dad, Claire said. I always do. Daniel didn't walk me to the door. August 18th, th.9:05 a.m. Margaret's old alarm clock still worked. Mechanical, loud enough to wake the dead, which always seemed like an unnecessary feature. I turned it off and sat there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Something had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but internally, quietly, the balance had changed. For months, I had been reacting. Now, for the first time, I was thinking ahead. By 10:30, I was sitting in a different kind of office. Not a bank. Not yet. A law office. Small, quiet, smelled faintly of paper and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Margaret had always handled these things, contracts, wills, anything with more than 2 pages. After she passed, I avoided it. Told myself there was no urgency. Turns out, urgency has a way of introducing itself. Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. Let me make sure I understand. He was younger than I expected. Early 40s, maybe. Sharp eyes. The kind that listened more than they spoke. You authorized your son as an account user in April. Since then, he has both requested and independently withdrawn funds totaling approximately $132,640, I said. He nodded slowly. And you're concerned about further access. I'm concerned about assumptions, I replied. That seemed to interest him. In what sense? In the sense that he no longer thinks it's my money. The lawyer leaned back slightly. That's not uncommon in these situations. Situations. Another neat word for something messy. What are my options? I asked. He didn't hesitate. First, revoke authorized access immediately. That's simple. Bank visit, sign form. I nodded. Second, document everything. Every transfer, every communication. Already started, I said. Good, he replied. Third, if you believe there's been misuse of funds without consent, we can pursue recovery. Recovery. I let that word sit for a moment. I'm not interested in chasing money through courtrooms, I said finally. Then what are you interested in? I looked at my hands. Old hands. Steady, despite everything. Control. The bank visit was at 1:15 p.m. Same building. Same soft chairs. Same polite smiles. Different purpose. I'd like to revoke authorized access on my account, I told the clerk. She nodded, typing quickly. Of course, Mr. Caldwell. May I ask if everything is all right? No, I said, but it will be. Forms were signed. Buttons were clicked. And just like that, Daniel no longer had access. No warning. No discussion. Just a quiet, administrative end to his assumptions. At 3:42 p.m., my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad, Daniel said, his voice tight now, stripped of its usual ease. Did you change something with the account? Yes. A pause. What the hell? There it was. The first crack. I removed access, I said calmly. You can't just do that without telling me. I almost smiled. I just did. Silence. Then sharper. We have payments coming up. The contractor, That sounds like something you should have planned for, I interrupted. You're putting us in a difficult position. I stood by the window, looking out at the same crooked fence, the same quiet yard. No, I said, I'm returning you to your original one. Another silence. This one different. Not calculation, not confidence. Something closer to uncertainty. Good, because for the first time since March, he wasn't ahead of me anymore. The invitation came 3 days later. Not directly from Daniel. From Claire. Of course. August 21 SD, 7:12 p.m. Dad, I think we should sit down and talk properly. No misunderstandings. Dinner tomorrow, 6:30. No, please. No acknowledgement of what had already happened. Just a scheduled resolution. Like a meeting. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. I'll be there. I arrived at exactly 6:28 p.m. Punctuality is a habit you keep when everything else starts slipping. The house looked the same. Lights on, curtains drawn, that quiet, curated warmth they like to present to the outside world. But something underneath it had shifted. You could feel it even before the door opened. Claire greeted me with a smile that didn't quite settle. "Dad, come in." No hug this time. Progress. Dinner was already set. Too formal for a normal evening. Plates aligned perfectly. Wine poured in advance. A performance. Daniel stood near the kitchen island. Arms crossed again. That same posture. Only tighter now. "We need to talk," he said, skipping everything else. "We are," I replied, taking my seat. Claire sat across from me. Daniel remained standing for a moment, then pulled out his chair with a sharp scrape against the floor. "No one touched the food. You blindsided us," he said. Straight to it. "No," I corrected. I stopped being convenient. His jaw tightened. "We had an understanding." "No," I said again. "You had an assumption." Claire leaned forward, her tone softer, controlled. "Let's not turn this into something hostile," she said. "We're trying to find a solution." Solution. Like this was a shared problem. "There is a solution," I said. "Spend your own money." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "You think it's that simple?" "Yes." "It's not," he snapped. "We structured things based on your support. The house, the expenses. You structured your life on money that wasn't yours." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Claire's fingers tightened slightly around her wine glass. "That's not fair," she said. "It's accurate." Daniel pushed his chair back suddenly and stood up again. "You're acting like we've taken advantage of you." I looked at him. Not quickly, not sharply, just long enough. "You have." The words didn't echo. They landed. Claire exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said, shifting tone again. "Let's be practical. We're not denying you've helped us. And we're grateful." "No," I interrupted quietly. "You were grateful." That stopped her. Past tenses wait. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Not the original one. A new one. Cleaner. Organized. I placed it on the table and slid it toward them. Daniel hesitated before opening it. Inside were copies. Every transfer. Every date. Every amount. Highlighted. Annotated. Clear. At the bottom of the final page. $180,240. He stared at it. Claire leaned in beside him. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. "You kept track of all this?" she asked finally. "Yes." "Why?" That question almost made me smile. "Because you didn't." Daniel flipped through the pages, faster now. "This doesn't mean anything," he said, though his voice had lost its edge. "It's just numbers." "Exactly. You gave that money willingly." "Yes." "So what's the problem?" I leaned forward slightly. "The problem," I said, "is what you did after it was given." He frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I continued, "you stopped asking. You stopped considering. You started assuming access." Claire closed the folder slowly. "We needed stability," she said. "You wanted comfort. That's not a crime." "No," I agreed. "But it becomes one when you take it without permission." Daniel's head snapped up. "Are you threatening us?" There it was. Finally, I held his gaze. "No," I said calmly. "I'm informing you." I reached into the folder again and pulled out one more document. Different paper. Different formatting. Official. I placed it on top. Claire read it first. Then Daniel. Their expressions changed almost in sync. Confusion. Then tension. Then something sharper. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "A formal notice," I said. "Prepared on August 18th. Claire's voice dropped. "You want a lawyer?" "Yes." "For what?" I sat back in my chair. For the first time that evening, I felt still. Not angry. Not hurt. Just certain. "To establish a record," I said, "of unauthorized withdrawals and financial misuse." The words settled slowly, like dust after something breaks. Daniel stood up again, but this time it wasn't controlled. "This is insane," he said. "We're your family. And this," I replied, tapping the document lightly, "is my money." Silence. Real silence. No performance left. No careful tone. Just the truth sitting between us like something heavy and undeniable. Claire was the first to speak. Her voice quieter now. Different. "What do you want?" she asked. Simple question. Finally, I looked at both of them. At the house. At the table. At the life they had built with pieces of mine. And then I answered. "I want you," I said, to understand exactly what your silence cost you. Neither of them moved. Good. Because this time, I wasn't going to repeat myself. They didn't call the next day. That more than anything told me the document had landed where it needed to. Silence, I've learned, isn't always absence. Sometimes it's calculation happening out of sight. Sometimes it's fear learning how to speak. I gave them exactly 48 hours, not out of generosity, out of structure. August 24, th.10:02 a.m. The call came while I was buttering toast. Real butter. Margaret never trusted the substitutes. Said if something was pretending to be something else, it probably had something to hide. Daniel said, no, greeting. Progress in its own way. I've spoken to a lawyer. I sat down at the table. I assumed you would. He says this could get complicated. Most things do, I replied, spreading the butter evenly edge to edge. A pause, and more carefully. Exactly are you trying to do here? There it was again. Not what did we do wrong, but what are you doing to us? I'm not trying to do anything, I said. I already did it. Silence. You removed access. You documented the transfers. You sent a legal notice. That's not nothing. No, I agreed. It's not. So what now? I took a bite of toast, chewed slowly, let him sit with the question he had finally asked properly. Now, I said, you return what wasn't yours to take. His exhale came sharp through the phone. We don't have that kind of money. I know. Then what are you expecting? I wiped my fingers on a napkin. Small habits. Clean edges. I'm expecting accountability, I said. The form it takes is up to you. They came that evening. No invitation this time. 6:11 p.m. I opened the door and for a moment we just stood there. Daniel looked smaller. Not physically, but something in his posture had changed. The certainty was gone. In its place, tension. Awareness. Claire held a folder. Of course she did. Can we come in, she asked. You already did, I replied, stepping aside. We sat in the living room. No prepared dinner. No performance. Just 3 people and a quiet house that had seen better versions of all of us. Claire opened the folder first. We've reviewed everything, she said. The transfers, the account terms, the authorization. And I asked. And she continued carefully. We acknowledge that the $9,750 withdrawal shouldn't have been made without direct approval. A precise admission, measured, controlled, and the rest. I asked. She hesitated. Daniel spoke instead. We asked for those, he said. You agreed. I did, I said. At the time. He leaned forward. So you can't just change your mind after the fact. I met his gaze. I'm not changing my mind, I said. I'm changing access. That landed. Claire stepped in again. We're prepared to make this right, she said quickly. Prepared. Another careful word. How? I asked. She slid a document across the table. I didn't touch it immediately. Read it, she said. I did. Refinancing proposal. Home equity line. Structured repayment plan. Monthly installments. 24 months. Total repayment. $95,000. I looked up. That's not the full amount. No, Daniel said. It's what we can realistically cover. And the rest? He hesitated, then quieter. Consider it support. What you intended. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. I closed the document. Placed it back on the table. No, I said. Claire blinked. No. Daniel's frustration flared immediately. Then what do you want? We're offering a solution. You're offering a discount, I replied. That's not fair. There's that word again. I stood up slowly. My knees complained, but I ignored them. Some things are worth standing for. You built a life, I said, on the assumption that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't object, that I would continue funding it, because it was easier than saying no. Neither of them spoke. You were wrong. The room felt smaller now, or maybe clearer. I walked to the cabinet by the window, opened it, pulled out another folder, thicker, older. I brought it back and set it down in front of them. What's this? Claire asked. My accounts, I said. She frowned slightly. Okay, I liquidated a portion of them yesterday. That got their attention. Daniel straightened. What does that mean? It means, I said, sitting back down, that as of this morning, the remaining balance is no longer where you think it is. Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Claire's voice dropped. What did you do? I looked at both of them. Carefully. Deliberately. I moved it, I said, somewhere you can't reach it, legally or otherwise. Daniel's expression shifted, confusion, then realization, then something close to panic. You're overreacting, he said quickly. This is unnecessary. No, I replied. This is overdue. Claire's composure cracked just slightly. And the repayment, she asked. I folded my hands. You repay every dollar you took without asking, I said. The rest? I paused. Not for effect, for clarity. Was the cost of learning who you are. Neither of them argued. Not this time. Because, for the first time, there was nothing left to negotiate. They left without raising their voices. That was the strangest part. No slammed doors. No accusations thrown like broken glass. Just quiet movements, papers gathered. Chairs pushed back carefully. Footsteps measured. Claire paused at the door. We'll review everything, she said. Do that, I replied. Daniel didn't look at me when he stepped outside. That, more than anything, felt final. The house settled quickly after they left. It always does. Walls remember how to be quiet. I walked back into the living room and sat in Margaret's chair. The leather creaked softly under my weight, the same way it had for years. Some things don't pretend to be anything else. They age honestly on the table. The repayment proposal still lay where I had left it. $95,000. Neatly calculated. Carefully reduced. Convenient. I folded it once. Then again. Not out of anger. Out of closure. The next week passed without contact. No calls. No messages. No checking in. Silence, when it comes from family, has a different texture. It's not empty. It presses against you, testing whether you'll break it first. I didn't. Instead, I made small adjustments. September 1 SD, 9:00 a.m. Met with the bank again. Finalized the transfer of remaining funds into a trust. Restricted access. Irrevocable without my consent. September 2 ND, 2:15 p.m. Updated my will. Specific language. No ambiguity. No assumptions left for anyone to interpret in their favor. September 3rd. Changed the locks. Not because I expected them to come uninvited. Because I no longer believed they wouldn't. On September 5th, the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a message. A letter. Claire's doing. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Precise, controlled, slightly angled to the right. I opened it at the kitchen table. Same place where this had all started. Dad, we've taken time to consider everything you said. While we don't agree with all of your characterizations, we understand your position. We are willing to proceed with a structured repayment of $110,000 over 36 months. This reflects what we believe is a fair compromise between your perspective and ours. We hope this can resolve things without further escalation. Claire and Daniel. I read it twice, then a third time. Not for clarity, for confirmation. Compromise. Fair. Resolution. All very reasonable words. All carefully chosen. All missing one thing. Responsibility. I didn't respond immediately. Not out of hesitation. Out of precision. September 7 th.11:20 am. I sent a single document. Prepared the day before. Reviewed twice. Signed once. A formal demand. $180,240. Full amount. Itemized with a clear deadline. And a clause. A simple one. Failure to comply would result in legal escalation, including recovery proceedings and documentation of unauthorized access. No emotion. No commentary. Just terms. The call came within the hour. Daniel. His voice wasn't angry this time. It was strained. You're really going through with this? Yes. All of it? All of it. A pause. Longer than any before. You take us to court? He asked. I looked out the window. The fence was still crooked. I still hadn't fixed it. Yes, I said. Another silence. And quieter over money? I almost corrected him, but I didn't. Because this time, he needed to hear it the way he understood it. October came colder than expected. Leaves gathered in the yard. The mornings carried that sharp edge that reminds you time doesn't slow down just because you want it to. On October 14th, I received confirmation. They had refinanced. Not comfortably, not cleanly, but completely. $180,240. Returned in full. Wire transfer. 10:47 a.m. I printed the confirmation and placed it in a folder. next to every other record. Complete. Closed. They didn't call after that. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not even to say goodbye. Just silence. Consistent. Final. A week later, I drove past their house. Not intentionally. At least, that's what I told myself. The black car was gone. The lights were off. The lawn overgrown. For a moment, I considered stopping. Walking up. Knocking. But I didn't. Because I already knew what would be on the other side of that door. Nothing I hadn't already paid for. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Fresh. Hot. Exactly the way Margaret used to make it. I took a slow sip and looked around the room. Same table. Same walls. Same quiet. Only difference. This time it belonged to me again. Fully. Finally. And I realized something simple. Something that had taken me $180,240 to understand. Silence isn't free. Sometimes, it's the most expensive thing your family will ever give you. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription.